Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Friday, May 4th. I just wanted to bring you this article because it's rare that you actually get to hear from the horse's mouth what I'm about to read you. Now, the old saying, healthy people aren't profitable, I've heard over 20 years ago, and it always resonated with me because it's true. So, the Den of Thieves over at Goldman Sachs issued a report warning pharma companies that curing disease is bad for business and that curing patients is not a sustainable business model for drug companies. Although the massive motive here is easy to see, with the industry bringing in over $453 billion in the United States alone in 2017, and that's what's at stake, and that's the only thing they give a shit about, many people have a hard time considering that these companies don't have their customers' best interest at heart. The idea that these companies would want to keep us sick is dismissed by many as a conspiracy theory, but let's not forget that these companies and their high-level investors are here to sell drugs, not save lives. And that's the biggest problem I have with Western medicine. Its only interest is in treating symptoms, not finding cures, and those symptoms are treated with the worst pharmaceuticals and the worst toxic chemicals. In fact, I think statistically, people who have cancer and are going through chemo and radiation more oftentimes die from the treatment rather than the cancer because the treatment just completely ravages their body. So, a Goldman Sachs analyst, Salveen Richter, sent out to clients of the firm about the potential of curing diseases with gene therapy. Richter estimated the market size for gene therapies could be as large as $4.8 trillion, as genes are the foundations of all biological activity. However, he has some concerns about how the ability to cure diseases could negatively impact the industry's bottom line. In the report titled The Gene Revolution, Richter asks the question, is curing patients a sustainable business model? And the conclusion that he seems to come to is no. In the memo, Richter plainly said, the potential to deliver one-shot cures is one of the most attractive aspects of gene therapy, genetically engineered cell therapy, and gene editing. However, such treatments offer a very different outlook with regard to recurring revenue versus chronic therapies. While this proposition carries tremendous value for patients and society, it could represent a challenge for genome medicine developers looking for sustained cash flow. As an example of this, Richter pointed out, Gilead is a case in point, Gilead Sciences, who had a treatment for hepatitis C with a cure rate of more than 90%. The Hep C franchise has gradually exhausted the available pool of treatable patients. In the case of infectious diseases such as hepatitis C, curing existing patients also decreases the number of carriers able to transmit the virus to new patients. Thus, the incident pool also declines. Where an incident pool remains stable, for example, cancer, the potential for a cure poses less risk to the sustainability of a franchise. Excuse me. It seems as if Richter is suggesting that he would rather people have HEP and that he has no interest in the prevention of diseases like cancer. Next, he suggested that pharmaceutical companies should only focus on diseases that have a steady stream of new customers, such as common inherited and genetical disorders. He comes up with 3 solutions. One is to address large markets. Hemophilia is a $9 to $10 billion worldwide market, growing at around 6 to 7% annually. Solution 2, address disorders with high incidence. Spinal muscular atrophy affects the cells in the spinal cord, impacting the ability to walk, eat, or breathe. Solution 3, a constant innovation and portfolio expansion. There are hundreds of inherited retinal diseases. These suggestions seem innocuous enough at first glance, as he is suggesting cures for some very serious conditions. But at the end of the report, Richter said, pace of innovation will also play a role as future programs can offset the declining revenue trajectory of prior assets. On a very surface level, it may seem that this is just some toxic manifestation of a selfish human nature or an example of the greed that exists in the world of business. but there is much more nuance to this situation. Goldman Sachs, along with many other Fortune 500 companies, have a very twisted way of looking at the world and conducting business because they achieve and attain their success by lobbying for monopoly or cartel-like protections from governments, not by actually providing value to their customers. Goldman Sachs analysts and big pharma execs have a business model that depends on cornering markets with patents and keeping innovation in their industries as stagnant as possible, which is why we see such cutthroat behavior from companies in these positions. If companies were forced to compete to stay relevant and keep their customers happy, instead of just developing and maintaining government-granted patents and monopolies, innovation would be driven by the desires of the customers, which would keep business honest, even if their only intention was to make money. Another solution, which I've been toying around with for some years, is just remove their corporate chartership. Corporations have only one concern, and that's the shareholders. They don't really care about the product. And I believe since 1986, they've been given immunity for most of their adverse reactions, particularly vaccines and most pharmaceuticals. They're granted immunity. So that's it in a nutshell. It's just very rare that you actually hear it from them, you know. Anyway, that's all I got for now. Have a good weekend. Be safe.